come to you this morning, Lord, or this evening, Lord, just thank you, Father, that we can be here in your house. Lord, as that song we just sang, Lord, the showers of blessings that you rain upon us, Lord, the mercy that you have on us, Father. I just pray that each one of us here would take note of those, Lord. Take note of your love and your kindness that you have upon us, Lord. So we'll bring them to it, Lord, as these prayer requests that have been mentioned here tonight, Lord, like Brother Hughes, Lord, as they're traveling, Lord, I just pray that you would be with them, Lord, guide their paths, Father, that they would be safe, make it there safely. Lord, that you be with that family as they deal with the loss of their mother, aunt, grandma, Lord, I just pray that you be there with them. Lord, I pray for this new one that's been born into this world, Lord, I just pray that you would guide her up, Lord, that she might be a child of yours, Lord, that she might do a work for you. I pray that you be with that family, Lord, that they can rejoice and be happy about it, Father. Lord, I pray that you be with the services tonight, Lord, that you would guide us in the singing, that we would lift praises to your name. Lord, that you be with the preaching hour, Lord, that you would be pleased with the words that the preacher brings to us, Father. I pray that our hearts would be open to it, Lord, that we're receiving it to our lives. Lord, we just thank you for your blessing. We thank you for your love that you have for us. Lord, most of all, we thank you for your Son, in whose name we pray. Amen.
Let's turn to page 315. Page 315.
What having the right to do something does not make it right to do it. Hey, Sister Sandra. How you doing? Tom, how you doing? Amen. You could use some of that frog hair about now. Amen. We're going to be looking in 1 Samuel chapter 24, and then we'll also be over in 1 Corinthians, a couple chapters over there. First Samuel chapter 24, we know that King Saul is threatened by David. David is a very valiant warrior, has reached up to that point anyway. And Saul wants David dead. I mean, it's just the way it is. Saul wants him dead. Well, David has favor with God, being the apple of God's eye, having cried out unto God many times in his distress, and God showed his hand to him many times. And it came to pass, when Saul was returned from following the Philistines, that it was told him, saying, Behold, David is in the wilderness of En-gedi. Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel, and went to seek David and his men upon the rocks of the wild goats. And he came to the sheep cotes by the way, where was a cave. And Saul went in to cover his feet. And David and his men remained in the sides of the cave. They were already in there. And the men of David said unto him, probably in a very light whisper, Behold the day which the Lord said unto thee, Behold, I will deliver thine enemy into thine hand, that thou mayest do to him as it shall seem good unto thee. I would say that gives David right to do whatever he wants to Saul whenever they brought to him, right? God has given him the right. The men acknowledged it and said, hey, this is the day. Here he is. Then David arose and cut off the skirt of Saul's robe privately. He snuck around there and he cut it off. A piece of that cloth. And it came to pass afterward that David's heart smote him, because he had cut off Saul's skirt. And he said unto his men, The Lord forbid that I should do this thing unto my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch forth mine hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of the Lord. So David stayed his servants with these words, and suffered them not to rise against Saul. But Saul rose up out of the cave and went on his way. David also rose afterward and went out of the cave and cried after Saul, saying, My lord the king. And when Saul looked behind him, David stooped with his face to the earth and bowed himself. And David said to Saul, Wherefore hearest thou men's words, saying, Behold, David seeketh thy hurt? Behold, this day thine eyes have seen how that the Lord had delivered thee today into mine hand in the cave. And some bade me kill thee, but mine eye spared thee, And I said, I will not put forth mine hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. Moreover, my father, see the skirt of thy robe in my hand? For in that I cut off the skirt of thy robe and killed thee not. Know thou and see that there is neither evil nor transgression in mine hand, and I have not sinned against thee, yet thou huntest my soul to take it. The Lord judge between me and thee, and the Lord avenge me of thee, but mine hand shall not be upon thee. As saith the proverb of the ancients, wickedness proceedeth from the wicked, but mine hand shall not be upon thee. After whom is the king of Israel come out? Who are you coming after? After whom dost thou pursue? After a dead dog? After a flea? The Lord therefore be judge, and judge between me and thee, and see, and plead my cause, and deliver me out of thine hand. And it came to pass, when David had made an end of his speaking these words unto Saul, that Saul said, Is this thy voice, my son David? And Saul lifted up his voice and wept. And he said to David, listen carefully now, he said to David, Thou art more righteous than I, for thou hast rewarded me good, whereas I have rewarded thee evil. Thou hast showed this day how that thou hast dealt well with me, forasmuch as when the Lord had delivered me into thine hand, thou killedst me not. For if a man find his enemy, will he let him go well away? Wherefore the Lord reward thee good for that thou hast done unto me this day. And he acknowledges that David is going to be a king, and not only a king, but a good king. He asked David to promise him or to swear to him that he would not hold any grudges against his family and let his name continue on and so forth like that. He goes on to do that, and David obliges him there. Now we're talking about not a playful, we're not on a playful video game here, where that everybody gets to go home and eat supper. This is a life and death situation. David has had to run for his life several times. And now we find that David and his men must not have been very many men. It certainly wasn't like Saul's 3,000. And they take off after David. Well, David makes it to the caves first, and his men are in there, and then they see the big army, and then Saul comes in the cave there where they're at. You talk about sweating bullets. I mean, here they are. They've hid themselves in this cave now. And then Saul comes in there, and they whisper to him. They said, hey, the promise that God gave you has come true, David. Here he is. Here he is. Kill him. And I'm supposing that David slipped over there, and as he was slipping over there, sneaking through there, slithering through there, he gets over to him, but his heart won't let him kill him. He's like, this is God's anointed. And then he listens and he says, but God told you he would deliver him into your hand, and you can do whatever you want to with him. You got the right, David. You got the right to kill him. David chooses not to. He's like, this ain't going to be good if I kill the Lord's anointed. And so what he does is he takes a little bit and he cuts a little bit. You say, well, why did he cut part of his skirt off? Why did he do that? Well, so that he would have evidence. I got the missing piece. How do you think I got it? So he didn't have to go through all of that, but nevertheless. And so he does this. Now I want us to think about this for a minute and try to put ourselves back there in that cave. Try to put ourselves, not necessarily as David, but as one of the men. One of the men that is with David, I'm talking about valiant men, men that are, these are men of war, men of blood, men they can kill somebody and move on to the next one. This is the type of men we're talking about. Now, of course, Saul and his army are the same type. They're the type that they can kill somebody and it don't bother them. They'll move on. Matter of fact, those kind of men can actually kill other kings and it not bother them. Which, by the way, that was something that kings usually were off limits. Of course, whenever you take a bow out there, and you just kind of sling an arrow in the air and let God direct it and it comes right down, pew. Then you can justify yourself saying, I didn't do it. I just shot the arrow in the air and it came down on them. I remember when I was coming up and Mama said that Rex had went off with Daddy and them, and they'd all went off bird hunting, dove hunting or whatever it was, and come back, and he was all excited, and he run in the house, and told Mama, he said, Mama, he said, you ain't going to believe it. He said, that bird run right into my shot. Sometimes it's about like that, isn't it? That the bird run into the shot, we didn't actually do it. We're not that skilled. But David's men were very skilled. Men that were good at this thing. They could slip through the army. There was 3 of them in particular at one place whenever David was tired and weary. And he said, but what I'd give for the water from the wells of Bethlehem. And lickety-split, 2 or 3 of his men took off and went and slipped around and got him some water and came back. And I'm thinking to myself, now wait a minute, if they can slip in there, and go right on in there, because the water's in the middle of the camp where they were at, and go in there and get that water and come back out, just think what they could do to that army. These were great men. Now they're in this cave, they're there, there's Saul, and David has something in his heart, and we're one of those men that are there, and we've said, listen, God has told you, David, it's all right. Here he is. The prophecy has come true. Here's the day. Here's the opportunity. Go kill him. And David takes off, and we're in a cave. It's dark. I'm assuming that it's very dark. And we're watching, we're listening, we're waiting to hear the gurgling. It sounds a little gruesome, doesn't it? But they're waiting to hear when David kills Saul. And they don't hear it. Then Saul gets up and he leaves, and he heads out to go on his way. And then David takes off after him. So we've got the story, we've read it. We're like, he's got a right to kill him. Something in his heart said no, that he wouldn't do that. These men are confused. David's men have got to be confused. They've got to say, I don't understand this. God told him, whatever you do, I'll deliver him into your hand, and whatever you do with him is up to you. He's got the opportunity. He's got the ability. But he don't do it. He takes another route. You see, sometimes it's better to execute humility on someone than it is to execute judgment. Sometimes it's better to have them broke down because his men, they gained something from David that day. They gained an integrity from David that they hadn't seen before. They gained a courage from David that they hadn't seen before. It takes one courage to go out and slay someone. It takes another courage that when you have the opportunity to slay him, you don't, and yet you face him again shortly. Because when David ran out there, it took a lot of courage for David to run out there and cry out to Saul. And then when Saul turned around, I get so aggravated with the hypocrites of this world. Saul wanted to kill David. We get that? Everybody get that? David cries out to him. And Saul said, "Is that the voice of my son David?" You hypocrite! I ought to slap you. But then I think that David got his little due when he says, "I got a piece of your garment. I could have had your head." Now I want y'all to go with me to 1 Corinthians. We're going to get where we live now. We're going to leave the cave, leave the rocks, leave the goats, wild goats as that is. Going to look at another man by the name of Paul. He writes in 1 Corinthians, and this will be chapter number 6 is where we will begin to read. Now, did y'all catch that one part in there, and I'm going to point it out again here in a little bit, that when Saul talked back to David, Saul said, "Thou hast been more righteous than I, in that you done me good while I was trying to do you evil." Saul acknowledged that. Now listen to what Paul says. We're going to begin in verse number 9. 1 Corinthians chapter number 6, verse number 9. "Know ye not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of God? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor idolaters, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves with mankind, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of God. And such were some of you." Get who he's talking to? I think he's driving home a point for the next few verses. "And such were some of you, but ye are washed, but ye are sanctified, but ye are justified in the name of the Lord Jesus, and by the Spirit of our God." Verse 12 is our text I want to get to. "All things," he said, "all things are lawful unto me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. Meats for the belly, belly for meats, but God shall destroy both it and them. Now the body is not for fornication, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body." Whenever the Apostle Paul was looking, he said, listen, he said, he lists all these sins, these great sins, and he said to them, he said, "And y'all were some of these." And he said, listen, he said, all things are lawful for him to do, for him to eat. Dietary laws. You say, well, that's only speaking about the dietary laws. We'll go over into chapter number 10 here in a little bit, and we'll look at a couple verses over there as well. But whenever Paul makes this application that legally he has a right to these things as a legal standpoint, he has a right to do it. But he said it's not always expedient for me. It's not always profitable for me to do this thing. It is not always, just because we've got a right to do it does not make it right to do all the time. There are so many things that today that we want to hold other people to standards that we could not have done ourselves. We want to press on them. Let's be the more righteous, like David was. Having the right to do this, having the authority, and there's a time for things we need to understand. There's a time for discipline and so forth like that. But you know, usually the first time that a child does something in particular is not the time whenever you want to just, bring out the belt, put the restrictions on them, put them in a corner, hang them from a tree, or whatever you want to do to try to break them from it. Usually the first offense is a lesson offense. We're going to teach a lesson with that. Right? Well, I hope y'all ain't that mean. Man, I thought my mama was mean. Boy, y'all are rough. It's like the first time, whoops, cut your head off. But it's not. So now Paul is saying to them, said, listen, y'all were some of them, but you've been washed from it. You've been cleansed from it. You've been sanctified. You've been justified in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. These things. And so he lists these things. He said, listen, y'all were some of these. And then he goes on in to say, and he said, listen, he said, the things are lawful for me. They're right. I have a right to these things. I can do these things out of the liberty that I'm made free with. I can do things. He said, but it's not always profitable for me or for you. You see, what we want is we want immediate vindication. We want it immediate. We want it right now. Given the opportunity, we'd take it. David didn't. Wonder why? Paul says here, talking about the foods and the things like that, that the things that he had liberty to eat, but he said it wasn't always right for him to do that, even though he had a right to do it. Did y'all get that? Now, go with me to the chapter number 10. And if I refer to verse number 32, if I say 32, that's because I wrote it down dyslexia way, and it's actually 23. Seriously, I wrote it down on my paper, 32, and it's 23. I sure hope that one day that the Lord takes control and doesn't give me the option to go up or down. I might not know which way's up, which way's down. But I settled that long ago. In 1 Corinthians chapter number 10, verse number 23, all things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but all things edify not. Let no man seek his own, but every man another's wealth. Whatsoever is sold in the shambles, that eat, asking no questions for conscience sake. For the earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof. If any of them that believe not bid you to a feast, and ye be disposed to go, he said, whatsoever is set before you, eat. Man, that scared me to death the first missionary trip I ever had to take. It did. It scared me. I mean, I had read over this and the Lord had pushed that on me, and I was like, but Lord, we're going down to the Chiquita capital of the world and I can't stand bananas. And the voice of an angel had preceded me down there and paved the way to where I didn't have to eat no bananas. $28 or $30? $27. He said, asking no questions for conscience sake, but if any man say unto you, this is offered in sacrifice unto idols, he said, eat not for his sake that showed it, and for conscience sake. For the earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof. Conscience, I say, not thine own, but of the other. For why is my liberty judged of another man's conscience? For if I by grace be a partaker, why am I evil spoken of for that for which I give thanks? Whether therefore you eat or drink or whatsoever you do, do all to the glory of God. Give none offense neither to the Jews, nor to the Gentiles, nor to the church of God. Even as I please all men in all things, not seeking mine own profit, but the profit of many, that they may be saved. It may not be for your conscience, but it may be for the others around you that are weaker than you, that you might be able to help them. In other words, even if it's right, even if you have a right to it, it may not make it right to do for the other people. Paul said in another passage, I have become all things unto all men, that I might by all means win some. In other words, why is it that we have to be vindicated and have to have our chest puffed out? Y'all ever watch them little? Y'all ever have a bunch of chickens at the house and you finally get you one of them little Bantam roosters? I mean, the little old tiny Bantam roosters, them little ones. Them little ones, they want to crow bigger than the big ones. They'll stand up and they'll ruffle their feathers. And I'm thinking, dude, you don't know, but he's going to thump you. But he speaks loud and he wants everybody to hear, and he jumps up on the post and he flies around and he's faster than the others and all. And I don't know if the other ones are scared of him or whether the other ones are just like, dude, shut up, it's early. But some people have to have it. They have to say, hey, I'm it. I'm the one. This is me. You're wrong. I'm right. Some of them have to boast of their righteousness. David didn't have to boast of his righteousness. The wicked saw his righteousness by his righteous act. His act of mercy. David showed a tremendous amount of mercy to Saul that day. His act also of honor and respect. By the way, I was taught a long time ago that I didn't have to respect the person, but I did have to respect the position. I mean, even though there was teachers, there was ones in leadership, and there's even ones in leadership today that morally speaking, they are wicked. They're just perverse people. But if they hold a position of authority, we have to show respect. It's biblical for us to show respect to that. David was honoring that, said, listen, this is God's anointed. I've got a right. I've got an assassination letter from God. I mean, I don't know that most people probably wouldn't take it that far, but I feel like it's really that. David had the right to kill him from God. God delivered him, said, here he is. But David said no. David restrained himself. He showed honor to the position of being God's anointed. Was Saul right? Did David vindicate Saul and make him right in what he was doing? No, he did not. He did not. Matter of fact, he even called him on it. He said, who'd you come out to get? You come out to get a dead dog or a flea? Y'all ever looked at that? In another passage, he talks about a flea too, coming out to get a flea, and you chase after him like a partridge in the mountains. And you know how that is? You have to keep going from one place to the next, 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 and you finally wear them down and finally get them where you trap them where you can kill them. Y'all ever try to catch a flea? Yeah, try to catch them. You grab and you think, I got him now. I'm squeezing that little devil. I don't think that's true, but y'all remember that movie that came out many years ago, I think in the mid-'80s, I guess it was, or late '80s, Karate Kid, I think it was. Wasn't that Mr. Miyagi? By the way, I've seen two people in my life that look just like Mr. Miyagi. And neither one of them could catch a fly with chopsticks. David showed mercy to Saul. David had the authority, he had the right, and he had the power to kill him. But he showed mercy. Not only did he show mercy to him, he showed respect to his position. There is little respect being shown to the positions of authority today. We see that in the law enforcement. We see that in the schoolhouse. Teachers, I don't know how y'all do it. I mean, y'all must show a tremendous amount of restraint not to grab them by the neck. And then when parent-teacher conference comes, if you can get the negligent parents to come, when they do get there and they're defending their child, you're almost like, let me show you a video. Tremendous amount of restraint. There's no respect for the ones that are in authority either. There's no respect for politicians. There's no respect for the elderly. The elderly, they're being neglected on every... They're like, matter of fact, even from the White House all the way down. They're like, these are ones, they've lived their life. Let's don't spend any more money on them. I mean, basically, that's what it's come to. It sounds really, really morbid, doesn't it? To think that, well, they're not worth spending this kind of money on. Let's don't offer this kind of treatment or this kind of medical help or whatever, and they'll just die and we'll be rid of them. Matter of fact, even in the funeral business, I'm going to get in here a little bit and preach. But even in the funeral business, whenever you see these families come up and they're like, well, I guess we ought to have something. Whenever they cremate them, and then they want to put them in a bag, say, well, we don't want to spend the money on an urn. Just put them in whatever you put them in. What do you put them in? Plastic bag inside of a cardboard box. And they're like, that'll do. We're just going to take them out and scatter them out anyway. That's actually showing some respect compared to a lot of them. They're like, well, what do you want to do? Somebody needs to claim the remains. And some of them, they don't even want to claim them. Well, give me a little bit in a little pendulum here. Some of them don't want any service at all. They want to go straight to the attorney and see what they got left. If there's any bills, they want to say, well, I don't know that I'm really their child. When it comes to bills. But whenever it comes to inheritance, they're like, I think I belong to them. You see the difference? No respect. Not only that, but I want to get right here where we are tonight. There's no respect, or very little rather, in the house of God. Very little respect for the house of God to honor that as a place sanctified to God's service. As a matter of fact, and I'm just going to tell you, you take it for what it's worth. Look around at how people dress when they come to the house of God. We've gotten very lax on this, folks. Gotten very lax. We're like, well, preacher, I'm just glad that they're there. Well, when they come, they ought to see people that not only are they glad they're there, but they've learned how to dress. So we ought to be examples to those ones. So when they come, they can see that we show respect by the way we dress. Not only that, but a respect by the way we come in. I mean, hey, they're making churches now where you got a coffee shop before you get in there, and and say, well, if you're not comfortable coming into the auditorium, you can stay out here in the coffee shop and watch the preacher on the TV. And by the way, you got to pay for your coffee. And then there's no respect for the preacher, but a lot of times the preachers, they're not acting worthy of the respect. Mamas and daddies, I know it don't happen here, But in some places where they, larger places, I can understand some of their procedures that they go through. But in some places they will drop their kids off for Sunday school or drop them off for nursery and be like, here, take them. I'm going to church. And they'll go sit in the auditorium. When they get done, they'll drop back by and pick up the youngins. Didn't God establish the family? Matter of fact, He done that before He established His church. And He put an honor on it and an order in it. And He didn't put two men raising a youngin' and call that a family. That's not a family. That's a mess. Or two women. You ever ask one of them, which one's mama? Both of them. Well, where's daddy? We don't have one. I'm like, wait a minute, I grew up with animals. You got to have one. You ain't get here like that, I'll guarantee you. The respect for the Word of God also. I know that we have liberties to do a lot of things in our churches. We've got freedoms for programs, for activities. Listen, we don't have a rigid number of things where we got to go down through a checklist and say, all right, well, the church has got to have a wooden pulpit, and we got to have pews. We can't have chairs. We got to have, we got to have song books. We can't have a screen up there to have the words on and all that. Listen, we've got liberties in those things. Whether you like them, whether you don't, that's fine. But some things are just not expedient for us. You might have the right to do it, but that don't make it right to do it. Lawful, but not expedient. Say, well, I can do whatever I want to. You sure can. Matter of fact, if you want to jump off, go up to the top of the building and jump off, you can. Have at it. But I just want to give you a little forewarning, a little notice. It won't be expedient for you. Although it will expedite something for you. Stand with me tonight. Aren't you glad that even though God had all of His right to destroy us and cast us into hell, Jesus had all the right whenever He was hanging on that cross. They were mocking at Him to call down the judgment of God on the earth. He had the right. He had the authority. And He had the power. But He exercised mercy. He poured out grace. And He cried out to His Father, please forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. I'm glad God has mercy on the ignorant. I know people want to say that's a really bad word, but actually used properly, it's a really good word. Ignorant of the truth. Willing ignorance is really bad. God so loved us that instead of casting us away, He didn't throw, the song says He didn't throw the clay away. He adds more water, adds more pressure, and turns it upon the will of this world as He molds it with His wonderful, marvelous hands to make something out of us. God so loved us. Let's so love others. Let's sing it a cappella. Let's sing the first verse of There is a Fountain Filled with Blood.